Welcome gentlemen and gentlewomen, today is Monday, we are into a new week, we're also getting even closer to the release of Season 4. However, today we have to talk about something else, once again about Dragonflight, because we have gotten more data mining of more interesting stuff that I thought was worth discussing with you. What we knew a few days ago was the introduction of the tier tokens for the first raid of Dragonflight, which introduced, of course, the Evoker class. Tier tokens meant Evoker had to go somewhere, and this is where the Evoker is going to end up going when it comes to the distribution of the classes in the different tier tokens. However, having tier tokens means something. It means we're going to have a tier set in the first raid of Dragonflight, which means we're going to have tier set gear in Dragonflight, just like the last raid of Shadowlands in Sepulcher. So we continue. After we halted the tier sets in BFA and we had no tier sets, we also had no tier sets in Castonatria and Sanctum. Now we continue after Sepulcher to have tier sets at the start of Dragonflight as well. So we have datamined the look of the tier sets. I thought it was going to be interesting to compare this first look of the tier sets, because it might be bound to get some changes, to get some tweaking of how they look, but to compare them to the concept art. The concept art is something we saw from Blizzard a couple of months ago, 3 months ago, whenever they announced Dragonflight and they showed the concept art of the tier sets themselves. So we can look at what was Blizzard intending in their concept arts compared to how they actually turned up in game. We can start this comparison with the first one, the new entry for classes, which is the Evoker. This was the concept art for the Evoker. As you know, Blizzard is known to theme the art style and the aesthetics of the tier sets around the theme of the raid itself. As you saw from Sepulcher, the tier sets themselves are very tuned around how the Sepulcher stuff looks. So the first raid of Dragonflight is going to be themed around a primal look, sort of like an elemental look, an earthy, rocky type of look. And the Evoker is going to be a male wearer. So this concept art looks quite fitting for a male wearing character. This is how it's going to look in game. So most of the things are kept quite in line with the concept art. We have some changes, the hands have been made more colored. For the most part, the general look of the set looks quite similar to the concept art of the first set for the Evoker class. Moving forward on the concept arts, we have Priest. This one was quite interesting because there are a lot of tattered clothing with some markings. It sort of screams caster when you look at this for Priest. It doesn't scream as much Priest, honestly. It is quite ominous of a look for a Priest character, but this is how Priest is looking in game. The look is quite different, of course. Perhaps you're also getting baited by the different color of the tier set itself, but definitely one of the bigger changes is of course the difficulty that we are gonna have in game to have 3D elements, right? Blizzard in most pieces of the gear, they're just going to paint. They're just going to paste the texture on the model itself. So many pieces of the concept art, like the tattered clothing all over here and the ones down in the kilt, won't really show up as well in the real in-game model compared to the concept art. This one is perhaps the one that looks the least like the concept art because of technical difficulties in making it look like that in-game, but still, it is a quite interesting look, particularly the top half, as it is classic for WoW tier sets. The shoulders and the helmet are going to be the bigger head turners when it comes to a cool looking tier set. Another set which perhaps might be a little bit weird is the Warlock one. This is the concept art of Warlock. This is perhaps one of the most tame Warlock tier sets. Blizzard always had some fun when they had to develop Warlocks, because of this demon aesthetics. They were always going all out with the way they looked. And in this tier set, they look a little bit more, normal, I could say. This is the in-game version of the Warlock compared to the concept art. It is still quite faithful to the concept art itself. The thing you will notice the most is that this barely looks like a cloth tier, right? Sure, you have the robe, but everything on top of the robe looks rocky, looks quite heavy, not quite fitting for a cloth wearer, which is perhaps the more interesting thing in the way this Warlock set looks. Last of the red concept art tier sets shown to us by Blizzard is the Demon Hunnter. Demon Hunnter honestly looks quite similar to Evoker. It's like a tinier version of Evoker, Evoker being male and Demon Hunnter being leather. It's a little bit softer. It looks like a softer version of the Evoker. In game it looks like this. Perhaps once again you're getting betrayed by the different color of the tier set itself, but quite a few things look the same. The main change, I would say, is the question as to why Demon Hunnter has lost its shirt. Perhaps it's an intentional choice to let you show your tattoos as a Demon Hunter, maybe. That's what Blizzard was going for. Most of the other stuff stays the same. Don't worry if you're missing horns. I'm pretty sure the horns in the tier set art is just the horn of your character, of your Demon Hunter character. They're not part of the tier set itself. I'm not too much of a fan of this Demon Hunter set. I think it's quite tame as far as cool looks go. After these 4 sets of red tier sets, we go into the crystal blue set of tier sets, because this was the concept art of Death Knight. As you can see, it is very sparkly, very glowy. It's one of the main attractions of Blizzard tier sets. Just how many things can you make sparkle or glow? And in the case of Death Knight, from the concept art, it looks like Blizzard was going for a lot of them. And when you look at the actual in-game model, well, yeah, looks like Blizzard is staying quite faithful to the concept art, because it is incredibly glowy and sparkly compared to the other tier sets we have seen so far. Of course, Death Knight being plate fits much better the earthy, rocky, minerally, crystally type of style of this tier, right? Much more than cloth or even leather, for example, so it plays out quite well on Death Knight. It looks great. It's gonna be even more interesting to see the different colors depending on the raid difficulty. Perhaps there are gonna be some even sicker colors than this combination for Death Knight. Talking about crystal-based tier set, then we have Mage. Mage also has some quite visible similarities to the Death Knight set, and in-game it looks like this. Again, of course, quite obvious, all of the crystal stuff being quite nice to look at. The helmet perhaps looks a little bit larger. You know, you have a pretty large head in this tier set as a mage. The main thing that will tip you off about what's going on there is, why do I see a mage's toes? Do mages cast spells with toes or something? Why are we naked there? I know, as I said, Blizzard is going for this primal aesthetic for this tier, but still, just cover the feet completely, right? That just looks off as a tier set. But the rest of the tier looks great overall. One of the bigger changes, actually, we could say, is the bandages. We have seen quite a few bandages as part of the tiers, white, you know, clear white bandages being part of the tier, but here they have all been turned black or dark at the very least, compared to what the concept art was, I guess, hinting at. The last of the crystal tier sets was Hunnter. Hunnter looks to have quite a few less crystal pieces than the Mage and the Death Knight, but still, when we look at the in-game model of Hunnter, we still see quite the spread in this coloring. It has gotten more colored compared to the concept art. We can see here that Blizzard added some coloring on the belt, on both of the handguards. They added some coloring on the edges of the boots, so they did increase the amount of variety in colors compared to the concept art. We then have the second half of the classes going on with Rogue. This was the concept art of Rogue. This is supposed to be the white-ish, dark white, if it makes sense. I guess this is supposed to be the black Dragonflight type of color. With Rogue, you had quite a few balls in the Rogue concept art. How did it play out in the actual in-game version of the tier set? Well, yeah, we still have some balls for the Rogue tier set. It is quite large. To be fair, this wouldn't look like to you at first glance as a leather tier, right? It would look at the very minimum a male tier set because of how thick it looks, right? Even as a rogue. As I said, Blizzard wasn't going for many bandages that were shown in the concept art. In here, we actually stay with the bandages. You look like a mummy, in fact, as a rogue. And still, you do stay quite faithful to how the concept art looked. Then we have Druid. Druid was like this in the concept art, quite Druid-y. even in this different theme. We do see quite the Druid aesthetic in this theme. When we go and look at the in-game version of this tier set for Druid, we have perhaps one of the first changes. The shoulders are slightly different compared to how they looked in the concept art, but the other part of the tier looks quite similar, quite reminiscent of how the concept art was supposed to look. As I said, it is still quite druidy. Even the helm alone does give you quite the Druid vibes if you had to guess which of the classes this belonged to, so it's quite nice to see this one for Druid. Last of this white-ish type of concept art was given to Shaman. Another trope of Shaman tier sets, having some big rocky shoulders with some cracking lightning going around it. This is quite the concept art for Shaman, which translates in-game to something like this. So, of course, we cannot see the particle effects, we cannot see exactly how it looks in full motion, but most stuff is staying similar to how it looked. You do have still this rocky, very large, being that the model for the tier set is an orc, the shoulders are gigantic, but they do play out quite well, the Shaman role. The helmet also looks quite nice for you to sit in this theme of being this rocky, primalist, elementalist type of set. Of course, the Shaman is the one that would have the easiest time fitting in on a theme like this one. There is, of course, the usual problem of the textures being painted, being pasted on the kilt. So the kilt is supposed to be rocks, you know, it's supposed to be made of rock being cracked by this bright lava beneath, but it just looks like a two-dimensional painted picture, so it doesn't look as nice in the kilt. In the second half of the tier, the bottom half of the tier doesn't look nearly as good as the top half. Last of the colors to inspect for the concept art was yellow. I'm going to assume it's the bronze, Dragonflight themed, and we have Monk first. So Monk has its usual beads on the tier set. Again, contractually obligated, monks are to have beads in their tier sets. How does it look in comparison when we look at the in-game version of this tier set? Well, no surprise, they are keeping the beads in their shoulders. Most of the other stuff is being kept the same, except for a handful of things that are annoying me quite a lot. Number 1, hands. Number 2, feet. Number 3, belt way too short. These are the main changes compared to what we see from the concept art. Having the bright glowy gloves with like talons almost, fangs almost in your fingers looks much cooler than just plain naked hands. And then the boots, once again, missing boots. Sure, you're a monk, it's more thematic for you to be bootless and whatnot, but it still just doesn't play as nice when you look at the completed tier set. Also, to finish the triggering for the monk set, I really don't like this sliver of neck and chest being visible between the chest and the helmet. So I think these would be the first things I would want to see fixed when looking at this tier set in-game. Next to Monk, we have Paladin. Paladin from the concept art actually didn't look as Paladin-ish compared to the usual Paladin stuff we see. Of course, having to go for this earth, rocky, mineral, elemental type of tier set, it doesn't really fit Paladin in the first place, so perhaps it was a little bit harder to make it fit with this theme. How does it look in-game? It looks like this. Okay, I can kind of see it now. The usual, just like Priest, Paladin also has a fetish for having these strands of cloths down their stuff with different markings, you know. It's a quite used trope for Paladin tiers. It is quite nice. The different coloring between the darker brownish stone type of material and then the more light clothing above it. It's a nice contrast in how it looks. Not very Paladin-ish, as I said, but still quite nice. It's also a nice change of pace compared to how usually Paladin tier sets look. Last in our list, we have Warrior. Last of the tier sets of the concept arts used to be like this for Warrior. Of course, being plate, it makes it much more easier for Blizzard to come up with a very stone-looking tier set that fits a plate user, a plate wearer. So Warrior looks like this in-game. Of course, fits very well, very easy to translate from the concept art in-game with this rocky look. Most of the stuff has remained pretty much the same. There are not really many changes compared to the concept art. It is one of the more loyal, one of the more faithful translations between the concept art and the in-game version of the tier set. So just like the Death Knight version for plate, it is quite easy to translate it in-game. It has been perhaps a little bit more challenging to transform cloth and leather users in game because of the theme around the tier set being about primal nature forces, earth, rock, minerals, crystals type of stuff. It makes it a little bit harder for leather and cloth sets to look fitting for this theme. However, this is how they look so far. We have already gotten one change within just a couple of days, which was making the Paladin helmet shadow the face, the head, so you cannot see anything other than the glowy eyes. So we are going to be very likely bound to get a bunch of different changes for the look of these tier sets in the future. My main pet peeve so far has been, number one, cover up the feet. Just don't have these naked hands and feet going around in a tier set. It just doesn't look as nice. And then one complaint, which is likely not going to get fixed anytime soon, which is the lack of 3-dimension depth to the gear, particularly the bottom half, your pants and your kilts, because they too often look like you're literally just pasting a texture on a model, which doesn't look as nice without the depth attached to it. So in the end, this is what Blizzard has in store for us in the first tier of Dragonflight when it comes to tier sets. Of course, what's going to be even more interesting than looking at how the tier sets look by themselves is going to be what bonuses are they going to give us for equipping them. That's going to be one of the main, major and only borrowed powers we are going to have at the start of Dragonflight. As you know, most of the borrowed power being shifted into the talent system. We don't have much else to gain throughout the course of a patch. So I'm also going to be interested to see what exactly we are going to get when it comes to tier set power. But for now, we can stop at just talking about their aesthetic and how they look so far. My personal prize for the coolest looking one for now goes to Death Knight. I really like the crystal look of many of their assets in the tier set. Let me guys know which one has stood out the most for you so far when it comes to looks for these tier sets. For now we can stop here though. I'm going to leave you to the rest of the start of your week, which for many is the worst day of the week, I'm afraid. A round of applause, of course, as usual, to my patrons for supporting me and allowing me to continue to put out content. I hope you can all enjoy, especially now that we're getting closer to Dragonflight and we're getting more and more content we have to go through. It's gonna be nice to know that I'm going to be reporting on this content with your support at my back. Also, for further support to this channel, you can like and comment down below on this video, as well as subscribe to my channel as well. And for a stronger parasocial relationship, you can also follow me on Twitter, as well as supporting me on Patreon at these links right here. Becoming a patron will also get you into my Discord server, where you can be in more direct contact with me if you feel interested in asking questions about future content, feedback about past content, tips or critiques or whatever you like. I'm usually always online and ready to have a chat if you want to. With this being said, it's time to say goodbye to each other until very likely tomorrow. Yeah, probably tomorrow, another video as usual. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys soon, and in the meantime, well, Izen, look at the bright side. It's very hot now and very annoying to sit through, but by the time we get into the beta and then Dragonflight comes out, it will be autumn and then winter. That's a good thing.